This is the story about a piece of music, an original composition entitled Rhapsody on the Rio Grande. The composition was written by a native South African organist, conducted by an Irish maestro, and performed at Texas A&M International University in Laredo by the culturally diverse Laredo Philharmonic Orchestra and the renowned Mariachi Nuevo Tecalitlán of Guadalajara.
I draw a lot of my creativity on nature, being in constant awe of what is happening around me. Especially for me, mountains, rivers, scenic places that would really take my breath away. That is the things that really inspires me to create. It just dawned on me, why not use the river as a metaphor for the whole work, about how this river actually divides cultures but also brings cultures together. Because a river is not necessarily always just a dividing element. It's also a common ground. I got out on a bridge just to go and have a listen to the river and actually felt the rhythm of the river. What am I hearing? What am I seeing? And once I see that, how do I relate that back into the sound? I'm dealing with images and trying to get that imagery together in terms of creating a portrait with soundscape. And that's what I tried to do with the work, with the Rhapsodia, to tell this story of the river flowing from the beginnings in Colorado, southern areas of Colorado, through New Mexico and back into Texas, where it reaches down to southwest Texas.
canto. Es el lunar que tienes, cielito lindo, junto a la boca. No se lo des a nadie, cielito lindo, que a mí me toca. Ay, 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 canta y no llores, porque cantando se alegran, cielito lindo, los corazones. Ay, 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 canta y no llores, porque cantando se alegran, cielito lindo, los corazones.
Every Laredoan has a unique, personal view about a river that never meant to be a boundary. The language and traditions of borderland culture and the dramatic events that shaped the lives of their antecedentes and history of two nations.
Laredo itself, as a community, is a fusion of culture of South Texas, of northern Mexico, as a country that is a melting pot of different immigrants, of different people. What binds us? What is one of the things that unites us all? And I think we can say it's music. And so to bring these different elements of music together in this place, I think is very appropriate and is a great way to celebrate, who we are as a people, as a place, as a community. And to bring that here, I think is a great thing.
Granada, tierra ensangrentada, encarnece toro. Mujer que conserva el embrujo de los ojos moros. Mi sueño rebelde y gitana, cubierta de flores. Granada, Manolo, cantada en coplas preciosas. No tengo otra cosa que darte que un ramo de rosas de suave fragancia que le dieran barco a la Virgen Morena. Tu tierra está llena de lindas mujeres, de sangre y de sol.
The language in Laredo is very much like the river. It is a powerful boundary sometimes, and other times it is just a conduit for travel. It is a conduit for expression. And language here, sometimes people, they kind of understand those linguistic rules. That there's a time to speak formal English, there's a time to speak formal Spanish. And then when you're with friends and other people, you can see people just break out into this hybrid language, and in a way that there's just no grammatical rules for, but people understand what you're saying. And sometimes it's a beautiful mix. It captures that whole notion that the culture really doesn't have a wall to it, a boundary to it. It's really just kind of meshes in together. And Laredo's had that history because we're just so close to each other.
Everyone assumes that it's a small Texas town from like a Western movie, and it couldn't be further from the truth. All these cultures colliding. Mexico is a lot of very regional cultures and languages and recipes and music. It's not just one thing. It's just like distilling the United States to like one thing. And what we have a lot of European traditions, Mexican traditions, American, Texan, and then the new culture, which is Tex-Mex, and that thing gets subdivided also. So it's fun to talk about that to people that aren't familiar with Laredo or have an idea. And then our border was very different from other borders along the valley, where I remember even driving down to McAllen when I was younger and realizing how separate they were from the Mexican side of the border. It was actually quite American on one side, while we were still one very fluid border, a very arbitrary border that tried to divide it, but failed miserably. It was one city divided by a bridge, and the bridge was just like walking down the street, and you know, more than, I have to say, 99% of my family was on the Mexican side. My grandparents, all my cousins, my uncles. It's just very fluid. You had a feeling that we were part of one home for everybody, and we didn't really distinguish it or label it as being Mexico or United States. It was just, I mean, I think if you heard English on the streets on the Texas side, it was weird, you know, because it was so Mexican. It was a very unique place where you were never put in a box. We were our own identity. And sometimes that's an identity crisis, because all of a sudden, I remember in high school or junior high when you start filling out the SATs or PSATs or whatever, the first ones you do, and I saw my options on a box that I had to click, the check, and I realized for the first time I am now considered this when I was always considered Mexican. You know, there was nothing in me that was, but now I had to put in a box that I was something other than, because I happened to be born on this side of the street, but it didn't make me any less Mexican. It's very unusual, but now it becomes an identity crisis for a lot of people on the border, but then you start to incorporate that into your life and celebrating that crisis of sorts, and realizing that you're a part of all these things, and you're very fortunate to have been born in a city and raised in a city that celebrates all these cultures and unifies them.
Well, for me, living in Laredo has meant everything to me. Being a child of the border means that you grow up speaking two languages, and you have a far more international way of looking at things. You're not just in the United States, you're on the border with Mexico, and there's a feeling of living together that between two countries that is not something you can have in any other part of the United States. It's a very singular experience. Laredo's also one of the cities on the border that's far away from any other city. It's about 150 miles away from any other big city. So you grow up here having a sense that you're far away from someplace else, so you're very much part of the community. You're inside the community that has its good things and its bad things. Growing up here teaches you a lot about the world.
What are we doing?
I don't know, I just came bringing stands.
One of the challenges of developing this project was that I don't speak any Spanish, or very little Spanish. Fernando Martinez speaks very little English.
Fernando, ¿cómo está? Bien, bien.
And fortunately, music is kind of a universal language. We will sit together, we will use Italian, which I do know some Italian because the music, since eternity, music has had Italian terminology on it. So I can say con moto, and he understood con moto is let's have a little bit more motion. And so we've been able to communicate about how to interpret this mariachi piece or Collins piece by singing, by expressing things in solfege, using guitar so that he can express to me, okay, this is how fast I want it to go. Okay, I didn't need necessarily to have him say to me X, Y, or Z. In the same way, when we were going through the scores, we could sing together, and all I had to do was gesture, and he would sing faster, slower, and it worked. We didn't need necessarily to communicate orally.